Kristen will be on in a few minutes. She's on her way.
Hi, everyone. It's Kristen. All right. I love seeing that there are so many people who are here on time. Let's not waste another minute. Let's see if we can get started. Now, the way that I do things, in case you've never been on a webinar with me, is I put information and sample questions into the chat. And you do not have to take notes because I'm going to take notes for you. And at the end of the class, I'm going to send you the transcript of our webinar this evening. So what I'd like to ask everyone to do is if you could please put your name and email address into the chat so that I can send you the transcript. I think everybody knows where the chat is, right? Okay, there we go. I'm getting the names coming in. Now, what I'm going to do is as people put their names and email addresses into the chat, I'm going to save the chat. So that way, if for any reason you get interrupted or you lose a connection or something like that, you don't have to worry because I have saved your contact info and I will send you the full transcript at the end of the class today. Now, while I'm waiting for, oh, please forgive me. I've had a little bit of laryngitis this week, so probably I sound a little froggy, but at least I think you can understand what I'm saying. Now, in the meantime, what I would like to ask you is, do people have any particular preferences? Is there any particular subject that you would like us to study? Sometimes people say they want to study math, or they want to study commercial real estate, or they want to study construction, or something like that. So, does anybody have any requests? Because I will always operate first and foremost on requests. So, please excuse me for a moment. I'm having my lemonade while I'm waiting for people to answer me. Do you have any preferences of what we cover? I'm assuming that if nobody's answering, that you just want to cover whatever's on the test, which is fair enough. Second question, are we studying for the school test or the state test or both? Excuse me. Now, Um, okay, usually I have observed, usually people are studying for the state test. I don't know why. But in this case, I have a couple of people who are oh, I have like three people who are doing both. Okay, so I'll be sure to include questions from both. Now, I always like to, oh, Angela says she's only about 30% of the way through the course. That is fine. You know why? Because my attitude is you got to learn the material, and it doesn't matter if you learn it now or you learn it later. It doesn't matter when you learn it, as long as you learn it. So don't feel bad if I ask some questions about chapters that you haven't covered, because it will still be valuable information for you. You'll still get the information of, oh, this is what I need to know for the test. All right. Um, Okay. Yeah. So some of the people are not that far through the class. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. All right. Okay, good. Good. Now, what I would like to do is I usually start with math. And the reason I start with math is I like to do it when we're fresh, because math can be kind of a pain and has a lot of steps and everything. So I like to do the math at the beginning when we are fresh. So the first question that I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you one that is extremely popular on the state test. Department of State lovety loves this question. So here we go. Can everybody see the chat? The question is, owner wants to net 200,000 on his house sale. Commission is 5%. What must the sale price be? So I'm not going to give you multiple choices. We're just going to go through the steps of how to solve this. And if you're a smart ski and you can figure out the answer, then by all means, please type it into the chat. Now, the trouble with this one is that Department of State is counting on the fact that you are going to make a common mistake. And the common mistake that people make is they calculate the commission based on the net price instead of the sale price. And that's not a good idea because if you calculate commission based on the net price, which is lower than the sale price, you're going to make less money. If you calculate commission on the net price, you're cheating yourself out of money. So we definitely don't want to do that. So let's go through how to solve this question. The equation that you're going to use is this. So I have a little A with the answer. So the equation you're going to use is you're going to take the net price, you're going to divide by the percent of the money that the seller keeps, and you're going to wind up with the sale price. And of course, that's what they're asking. They're asking what the sale price has to be. So how are we going to do this? Now, when the seller goes to the closing, the buyer and the buyer's mortgage bank are going to pay 100% of the money, right? They're going to pay 100% of the sale price. And if the broker gets 5% of the money, what percent of the money does the seller keep? If the broker gets 5%, what percent does the seller keep? 95%, right? So now we know how to fill in this equation. So we're going to say that the net price, 200,000, is the net price. And that is divided by 95% to the seller. And got to pull out my calculator here. And by the way, let me show you my calculator, okay? My calculator is an El Cheapo from the dollar store. I think I got it on Temu. Okay. It's like super cheap. It cost me like $2 on Temu. Okay. That's what you need for the state test. Do not bring a rocket ship like this one. Okay. This one is a financial calculator. And if you go to the state test with a financial calculator or a real estate calculator or a scientific calculator, they will confiscate it. Okay, so now I think somebody is way ahead of me. Let's see, I'm going to say 200,000 divided by 95%. And Karen, or I don't know if it's Sunny or Karen, but whoever is signed on at the moment is absolutely right. It is $210,526.32. So that is going to be the sale price. Now, on the test, they're not going to give you the cents. On the test, they're just going to say $2,010, 526. And sometimes they'll round it off to 27 or something like that. So don't worry about like dollar and cents. Worry about the big number. So 210, comma 526 is the answer. So that is going to be the sale price. There you go. So very important when you get to the test, you have to use this equation. And I'm giving you a little note here to always use this equation. Because what a lot of people do, and it's wrong, so don't do it, but a lot of people take 200,000 and they say, well, if the broker is getting 5% and the seller is getting 95% of that, then how much is the broker getting? And they say, well, the broker's getting $10,000. But $10,000 is 5% of 200. 5% of the sale price, excuse me, 5% of the sale price would be 10,525. So if you take the broker commission as the percent of the net price, you're cheating yourself out of $525. Okay. All right, let's try another one. What a very favorite question of theirs on the test that they really love is cash on cash return. And for some reason, people seem to forget that one. That's from like one of the later chapters. That's from chapter 16. And people seem to forget it. Now, the main thing that, the main objection that people have to cash on cash return is that people forget why they're doing it. So the idea is this. Let's say you've got a guy like Sam, and Sam has $500,000 to invest. Now, he doesn't have to buy a building. He could invest in Bitcoins. He could buy mutual funds. He could buy stocks. He could buy foreign currency. There's all kinds of stuff he could invest in. He could invest in a business. There's all kinds of things that Sam could do with his $500,000. So the purpose of the cash on cash return is for Sam to figure out how he's going to get the highest return for his $500,000 cash investment. Where the question that Sam is asking himself is, where can I get the highest cash return for my $500,000 cash investment? So cash on cash return compares the income a building makes for the owner with the amount of money the owner invested to buy the place. We don't mean the sale price, because most of the sale price will be paid by the mortgage bank, right? We mean the down payment and closing costs that Sam pays with his own cold hard cash. Does that make sense? By the way, if people want to make a comment, you're welcome to unmute yourself and talk to everyone. People who have just arrived late, not late, but you know what I'm saying, who missed my original announcement. I'd like to ask you if you could please put your name and your email address into the chat for me, because then at the end of the class, I'll be able to send you the transcript of this meeting. And if you did miss the first minute or two of our meeting today. You don't have to worry because I'm sending all the information to you after class tonight. All right. So let's see if we can see what Sam's problem is here with cash on cash and see if we can solve it for him. Now, one thing I want to caution you is that the state test is very tricky. They love to try to trick you. The school test, not so much. The school test doesn't really try to trick you. Uh, the school test, I would say, is a little bit harder than the state test because the state has requirements for the schools of exactly how many questions they need to have on each topic and things like that. And the state tends to be pretty strict with the schools about what we have to put on the tests. So the school test, I would say, is generally harder than the state test. So if you've already passed the school test, you should do well on the state test. All right, so Sam wants to buy a building for 2.5 million. That's the sale price. We don't care about the sale price, right? Because we're not trying to figure out, is this a reasonable sale price? We're trying to figure out where can Sam get the highest return on his $500,000 cash investment. So when they tell us that he's buying the building for 2.5 million, we know Sam has to be getting a mortgage because he's only putting in $500,000. But we don't care about the bank's mortgage money right now. We care about Sam's 500,000 that he's investing. So we're going to compare Sam's investment, his down payment of 500,000 with the income on the property. But there's another trick, one of their favorite tricks. One of the state's favorite tricks is to give you information that you don't need. And they did that here. You don't need the price of the building. Another favorite trick is to change the terms. Like they ask you the question in months, but the answer has to be in years. Or they ask square feet, but want the answer in acres. Those are their two main favorite tricks on the state test. So first and foremost, let's do the equation for cash on cash return, which you have to remember. I can't believe that Mildred, you're really good. She has the answer already. Okay, so she's given us a spoiler here. That's great. Okay. Uh, so here is the information. And when I do math, I always work it out step by step because I can't stand it when I'm reading a math book and they like skip a step because they think it's obvious. So I don't do that. Okay, before tax cash flow is a type of income for a building and is abbreviated BTCF. You could say that Sam's down payment of 500,000 is his total cash investment. The equation is before tax cash flow income divided by the down payment equals the percent cash on cash return. But they tell us monthly before tax cash flow. And Sam wants to know how much percent he's going to get back per year. It's always done per year. So 15,000 monthly before tax cash flow times 12 months equals 180,000 annual before tax cash flow. 180,000 divided by 500,000 down payment equals 0.36, which is the same as 36% cash on cash return. So these two questions are ones that they absolutely love on the state test. Now, what I would like to do with you is clear up any of the math questions that you might see on the school test. Because I think that the school test is going to have a little bit harder math than the state. Now, I recognize that some of the people who are only a few chapters in haven't learned yet about some of this math, but that's okay. You could learn it now, and you will have these questions to study from when you're ready to take the school test. Uh, this commercial math stuff is in chapter 16, so it's pretty far down the road. Okay, here's the question. A building sells for 700,000 at 9% cap rate. What was net operating income? And I'm going to give you choices. Now, we know that if I offered to sell you a home, you would probably want to know what does it look like and where is it, right? But if I were going to sell you a commercial building, you wouldn't care what it looked like. You wouldn't care where it was. You know what you would care? You would care if I buy this building, how much money will I make? That's what you care about for a commercial building. You're not going to live there. You don't care what it looks like or where it is. You care if I buy this thing, will I make a lot of money? So with a commercial building, if it has high income, it has high value. If it has low income, it has low value. So the market value of a commercial building is based on its income. So here are the choices for you. And let's see if we can go about solving this. Now, in commercial real estate, I'm impressed. I'm impressed that people are getting the answer already. Oh, I'm impressed. I'm going to have to come up with some harder ones for you people. In commercial real estate, the value of a building is based on its income, specifically annual net operating income, which we abbreviate, if you're cool, it's NOI. All right, NOI is the most important number to know about a building. So if it has high NOI, it has high value. Low NOI, it has low value. Pretty easy. Now, the equation we use to find value and NOI is called ERV. And I always joke around. Yeah, I always joke around in the class about how Irv is a guy. All right. The reason why is because I had a friend who, whenever he goes to conventions, like real estate conventions, they give you those little name tags that say, hello, my name is, and you write your name in there. He always puts his name down as Irv. I mean, obviously that's not his name. He puts in the equation Irv to see if people get the joke. And most people don't get the joke. They think his name really is Irv. So I thought that was so funny that I always characterize Irv as being a person. Now, What IRV stands for, IRV means income, which is NOI, divided by rate of return equals market value. So as you can see, the value of the building, the market value of the building is based on the income. So people usually use IRV to estimate what a building should sell for. Now, in real life, what's going to happen is when a person is selling a building, they share information about the building's income with the buyer. So who's going to tell the buyer how much income the building makes? You are. You are, because the owner of the building, the seller, is going to give you his operating statement that tells the building's net income for last year. And you're going to give that information to the buyer. Now, rate of return, that's market information. The same way that, like, if you wanted to know what interest rates were, you would go online and say, what are interest rates right now? And interest rates, of course, go up and down. Same thing at a bank. How much interest is a bank paying on a savings account, or how much are they paying on a CD or something like that? They tell you, but it keeps changing all the time. So I was going to confirm that NOI would be in the paper you would get for the office buildings. Yeah. NOI is going to be the last line on the operating statement for the building. Okay, so net operating income is the bottom line. Okay, so you know the income because the seller told you, and you know the rate of return because you do a little bit of market research. What rate of return are people getting on an office building in the financial district? Okay, so you know it because you do a little bit of market research, and you can come up with the value. Now, in this case, though, they're making it a little bit more difficult because this particular question isn't giving you the income and asking for the value. They're giving you the value and asking for the income. So it adds a little step, but it's not much more complicated. Whenever you have three factors in an equation, you can put the equation in three different orders. So you could say I divided by R equals V, or I divided by V equals R, or I equals R times V. And you choose the equation where the thing you don't know is by itself. So you choose the version of IRV where the thing you don't know is by itself. In this case, the third one, because you don't know I. So now we say I equals R times V. And then we just put in the numbers. So what did we say? The I we don't know. So I equals, and the rate of return in the question, R, was 9%, and V was 700,000. So it's going to be 9% times 700,000. And so the answer, I'm consulting my calculator here. Okay, the Smarts Keys had it right all along. I was just confirming it. So the answer is indeed C. So the income, the net operating income, is 63,000. Okay. Now, those of you who just joined us, at the end of the class, I'm going to send a transcript of this meeting to everyone who was in the class. So if you didn't already do it, could you please put your name and your email address into the chat for me, and I'll send you a copy of the transcript. Now, I think I'm starting to get a little tired of math already, but I think we should do at least one more because the school test has more challenging math than the state test does. And I mentioned earlier that that's because of Department of State requirements. So I'm going to give you another school test question. All right, I'm saving the chat so that I am certain that I have everybody's email address. A rectangular lot is 150 feet by 380 feet. How many acres is it? All right, well, you can only solve this if you know how to convert square feet to acres. And the way to do that is with, I call it the magic number, the magic conversion number, which is 43560 square feet equals 1 acre. Okay. And I hate to do it to you, but you must memorize this number at least until the day after the test. Now, most people remember it as 7-Eleven because three, I'm sorry, 4 plus 3 is 7. And 6 plus, I'm sorry, 5 plus 6 equals 11. 7-Eleven. Okay, that's how most people remember it. I like to remember it the real way. Okay, so where does this weird freaking number come from? 43560. Where does it come from, right? Well, 43560 comes from the idea of 1,000 years ago, uh, they measured how much land one guy with one ox could plow in one day. And it turned out to be 66 feet by 660 feet. And if you multiply that out, 66 times 660, it really is 43560. So 66 feet times 660 feet equals 43560. So the way that I remember it is just the sixes. 66 times 660. That's how I remember the number. All right. So now it's pretty easy. Let's see. Uh, the lot has, so here's the answer. The lot has how many square feet? 150 times 300, was it? 380. And I get 57,000 square feet, right? All right. So 57,000 divided by the magic number equals I got 1.31. Now, I know that 1.308 is a more accurate answer, but Department of State usually they don't like to use decimal places a lot, so they'll probably round it up to 1.31 or 1.3. So the answer is going to be 1.308 acres, but the test will round it up to 1.30, 1.3, or 1.31. They never try to trick you with rounding errors. Now, I'm going to, yeah, okay. Um, I'm going to give us a break from math now. I don't want you to feel like this is just a math class tonight. So we'll do something else, and who knows, maybe we'll come up back to the math and maybe we won't. Uh, I would like to give you a couple of questions. The ones that I have in mind right now are actually from the early chapters. So the people who have just started the course, you're going to be on the spot too. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions that they lovety love on the test from the first couple of chapters. Okay, I'll talk about ratios. A ratio is simply when you divide one number by another number. And so usually what you're saying is you are comparing two numbers and they the answer will come out as either a decimal. Okay, so a decimal would be like 1.1, 1.2, something like that, or it could come out as a percent because let's say 0.2 as a decimal is the same as 20%. How do you convert a decimal to a percentage? It's easy. Just multiply by 100. Because what does the word mean? Percent? Cent is 100. So, like century is 100 years. So percent. So if you want to convert a decimal to a percentage, you just multiply by 100. That's all. All right. I'll put that information in the chat. Okay. So here's the question. I think it's from chapter 1. So let's see if we can remember chapter 1. When Department of State revokes a salesperson's or broker's license, they cannot apply to be relicensed until how much time has expired? 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, or a year? What's the answer? Exactly right. Answer is a year. Now, there's no guarantee that the person is going to get their license back. I mean, I'll give you an example. I know a lady who got her license removed. She was a broker. And are you ready for this? She got her license removed because she didn't pay tax. She didn't pay income tax. And when she was confronted by the IRS and when somebody reported her to Department of State, her explanation was she didn't know that she had to pay tax on her income. So she got her license removed, and who knows how much trouble she got into with IRS. But Department of State removed her license. Now, this woman came back every single year to reapply to get her license back. But Department of State takes a very dim view of financial crimes, like tax evasion. And so, as far as I know, she was never able to get her real estate license back, and she went into another sector of the economy. All right. So the answer is definitely 1 year, but it's not guaranteed that you get it. You're just allowed to reapply after 1 year. Now, another thing that they love to ask people about is they love to ask you who needs a license and who doesn't need a license. So here is a question you will see on the state test, and you'll probably see a similar question on the school test. So who can be paid to do real estate services, but they don't need a license? Okay, an auctioneer, a mortgage broker for commercial mortgages, an attorney who doesn't sponsor salesperson, or a property owner for property manager for many owners. Okay, so while you're doing that, I am checking to see if I am finding a similar question on the school test. Okay, the question that we just did a minute ago about if the broker's license is revoked, there's a very similar question on the school test. But first, let's do this one. The answer is definitely C. Okay, so the auctioneer needs a license because they are selling real estate. They're just selling it to a whole bunch of people at once instead of one person at a time. The mortgage broker needs a license. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but real estate salespersons and brokers are allowed in New York State to arrange commercial mortgages. We're not allowed to arrange residential ones because of consumer protection. All right, so we're not allowed to do residential mortgages for people, but we are allowed to do commercial mortgages. The attorney does not need a real estate license because the attorney only needs a license if they open up a brokerage and hire salespersons. And the manager needs a license if they work for more than one owner. Okay. Department of State loves questions like this. So I have another one just like it. This is also from the state test. Which person would be exempt from the real estate licensing requirement? Oh, that's great. It doesn't have any A, B, C, D. Sorry about that. I don't know how that happened. Tenant relocator, an attorney who does not sponsor salespersons, property manager for several different owners. Very similar question, right? They just kind of moved things around. So what's the answer to this one? The answer is still the attorney. Now, on the school test, they ask you if a broker's real estate license is revoked by Department of State. Department of State loves to call themselves DOS. So on the test, they won't call themselves Department of State. They'll abbreviate it as DOS. What happens to the licenses of salespersons? Thank you, associated with them. Thank you, Gina. The answer is the licenses are suspended. That's great. She got the answer before I even gave the choices. All right, let's see what else we have. You know, I'm going to give you a question from the school test having to do with deeds. And I'm getting the idea that you people are a little bit too smart for me. So I'm going to try and make the questions harder. All right. Not make them harder. I'm going to try to choose harder, more challenging questions for you. Okay. Now, the question is, where are quitclaim deeds frequently used? And I'm going to give you choices. The choices are conveyance of real estate after death, divorces, to grant full covenants, or as a gift deed. Divorces. All right, you people are happening. Oh, I'm gonna have to bring out the big guns. I'm gonna have to. I think I've got a hard one for you. I've got a hard one from the state test. let me just type the correct answer for you. What are funds paid to lender at time of loan origination, which account for the difference between current market interest rate and lower contract rate of the promissory note? Now, I look at that question and I say, huh? What are they asking? And I think that is probably the biggest problem with the state test, is that sometimes the way they ask questions is really unclear. You can't, they're very verbose and you can't figure out what they're trying to ask you. So let me read this again. What are funds paid to lender at time of loan origination? So that would be the beginning of the loan, right? Which account for the difference between current market interest rate and lower contract rate of the promissory note. Well, let's think about it for a minute, okay? So the borrower is going to pay money to the bank when they start their loan to get a lower interest rate on their promissory note compared to the market interest rate that's out there. So what is money that a borrower would pay to a bank to get a lower interest rate? Beautiful. Everybody got it right. So another way to say this is, what is money a borrower would pay to the bank to get a lower interest rate on their mortgage? And the answer is indeed C, discount points. In other words, they're paying points to get a discount. What is a point? A point, a point is 1% of the loan amount. Okay. All right. I'm going to try to come up with another hard one. This is from the land use chapter. The right to deviate from existing zoning ordinance justified by a special hardship is accomplished by applying to local government for a variance, spot zoning, incentive zoning. Oh my goodness, you people are doing great. All right. Everybody's got it right. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go to the school test and see if I can find any hard ones there. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Once again, this is a question about license law. So the people who have already taken chapter one, you should have no trouble with this one. So the question is, what is a common violation of license law? And of course, there's no way to answer it without choices, so I'm going to give you choices. Designated agency, co-brokerage in rentals, illegal dual agency, or unauthorized sub-agency. 'Agency. 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 'Agency Thank you. Illegal dual agency. Illegal dual agency is correct. I think I told the funny story about the broker who the broker represents the landlord, but she's never met the landlord. The landlord is some huge conglomerate, right? Uh, and this nice tenant comes in and buys her coffee and donuts. And so she gives him a break on the rent. That is so illegal because she is supposed to fight for the landlord to have the highest possible price. She's supposed to fight in the best interests of her client. She's not supposed to give concessions to the borrower just because the guy buys her coffee and a donut. So, the answer is C. As a matter of fact, that is probably um, one of the top three things that brokers lose their licenses for in New York State. The two main things that brokers lose their licenses for are fair housing violations, agency violations, and of course, the third would be misrepresentation. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the top three things. Misrepresentation means not telling the truth. Agency violations means not being loyal to your client. Okay, so answer is C. Illegal dual agency is extremely common, unfortunately. I have some people here I just can't stump. I'm gonna have to find some more good questions. Okay, I'm gonna try one here. I have a question about property tax. Now, we know that income tax we pay to the federal government and the state government based on how much money we make. And the income tax is based on us as people. But real property tax is paid to the local city or town, and it's based on the value of the property, and the tax is on the property, not the person. So whoever owns the property has to pay the tax. So they're going to ask you, and this is on both the school test and the state test. How is property tax rate set? And your choices are automatic annual increases based on the tax levy, proposed by the mayor, or set statewide by the state government. So how is property tax rate set? Thank you. Thank you, the tax levy. Now, the reason I smiled when I said proposed by the mayor is because, like, a lot of people think that there's a person or a bunch of people who set the tax rate, and they don't. The tax rate is set by the equation. The tax levy is the amount of money. Answer is tax levy, which is the amount of money the city or town needs to raise from property tax so they can meet this year's budget. Okay. Let's try some mortgage questions. Here, I'm going to give you a mortgage question from the state test. In which type of mortgage do monthly payments get higher as years go by? Assumable, FHA, bridge, or graduated payment? Whoa, you people are amazing. I don't think anybody has gotten any questions wrong yet, nor has anybody been stumped on any questions. I've like never seen that. I've always been able to stump people somehow on mortgages, uh, or any other question, not just mortgages. Let's see what else I can find here. I have one that a lot of people don't get. This is the state test. Which contract provision requires that a certain act is complete before that contract is binding? Concession, conversion, contingency, or covenant? Whoa, whoa. Color me impressed. All right. Answer is C. I'm not kidding you. I mean, normally when I teach these webinars, um, people, struggle with some of the questions, and I have to explain each one afterwards. But everybody is getting all these right. And it's not just one or two people, it's like everybody. I'm really, really impressed. All right, now, let's talk about what a contingency is because there are some people in the class who haven't taken that chapter yet. All right, now I'm going to tell you a story. There was a guy who was going to buy a home. He was going to buy a condo, and he was going to buy a condo for $1 million. He signed the contract, and he made a contract deposit of $100,000. His mortgage fell through. The guy didn't have $1 million cash. And if he couldn't get a mortgage, he couldn't buy the place. And if he couldn't buy the place, that meant he would have to break the contract and lose his $100,000 deposit. But the lawyer put a contingency into the contract. And the contingency said, um, a mortgage contingency, for example, means that if buyer can't get a mortgage, they are allowed to back out of the contract and get their deposit back. Okay. So, unless the contingency is fulfilled, the person gets a mortgage, the contract is not binding and they can back out of it. All right, let's try one from the law chapter. Now that's chapter 3. So people who are only a little bit of the way through the course should uh should be able to answer the next question. Now, Gina says, I've seen someone post that on Facebook, and I told them that's why you need a contingency. We are allowed to comment on Facebook posts of things we learn. Well, why not? You're a private citizen and it's free speech. So RELNY can't tell you whether you're allowed to say stuff or not. You can say anything you like, anytime you like. I mean, I think that one thing that has happened to me, to be fair, is sometimes I've had people go online and say, Kristen said this or RELNY said that. And sometimes they say things that aren't true. So, if you're quoting somebody else, you can get into dangerous territory because it's very easy to accidentally misquote someone. But if you are stating information that you yourself have learned and now know, why not? Right? I offer my opinions on things all the time. So you're welcome to do that.
I have a question.
Uh,
On the exam, are they gonna word it the same way you worded it? Like, instead of like writing a story, like if they're the same way you would, like the same way you just said it, like, oh, something happened with my friend and he didn't put a contingency, so he didn't put this, so example, you know what I mean? Like instead of
yes,
saying which, what was the question again? Hold on, I'm trying to get back to it. Which provision would be needed, you know what I mean, for a binding contract? Would they write it that way or would it write it in a story way?
they do both.
Okay,
So, for example, remember the one we had with Sam, how Sam wants to buy the building for 2 million? Okay.
right.
That is in the form of a story. So sometimes they'll tell you a little story about some guy, but other times they will ask it in a more objective way. And so what I do is, well, let me tell you how I know these questions. I have two sources of these questions. The first is taking the test myself, because for various legal reasons, I have taken the test in my lifetime. I think I've taken it like 4 or 5 times. So what I do is I'm not worried about passing it, I'm worried about memorizing it. So I take the test and I spend the full 90 minutes remembering all the questions. And then I run out of the room and do a brain dump and write down like every single question and answer that I can remember. That's one way that I know what's on the test. And the most recent time I took the test was February of 2024. The other way is that I have had 100,000 students. And they go downtown and they take the test and they do the same thing. They do a brain dump and they write down all the questions they can remember and send them to me. And after I've had 10, 20, 30, 100 students send me the same questions over and over and over again, I'd have to be stupid if I don't know what the questions are. So these practice questions that I give you, I make them as close as possible to the way you will see the questions on the test without, violating the law and actually printing the test for you.
Well, since we just brought up the test that you recently took in 2024, correct?
Uh-huh.
Um, I heard that they change it every so often and oh, they don't? Like, I guess I think when I took a course about 15 years ago, and they told me that every few years they change the topic that they mostly focus on the exam, because obviously they're not going to keep doing the same exam, the same questions over and over again every
Well,
single year.
I'll tell you something. I
Hmm.
first took the test more than 40 years ago, and I took it again like a year or two ago, and it was same questions. All right.
Okay.
However, in support of what, this individual said to you, they are partially correct because in recent years, Department of State has made the test more and more and more focused on fair housing. They love fair housing. And the last time I took the test, I counted, and there were 15 fair housing questions. Okay. Now, another thing that happens is they change the test when the law changes. Because sometimes the law change. I mean, for example, New York State changed in 2010. We changed our divorce laws. And we were the last state in the whole freaking country. We were the last state in the country to adopt no fault divorce. So obviously, when the law changes, Department of State is going to go ahead and change the test. So they do
Um,
change for that reason.
so now that they changed it from 75 hours to 77, that's also going to change, obviously. Right.
Well,
Okay.
that's funny because when like they changed it in 2023 and I took the test in 2024 and the two new topics, the two new hours that you're referring to, the subjects are implicit bias and cultural competence. And there were no questions on the test about those two things. So when I got home, I wrote Department of State and I said, do you have any new questions on these two subjects? And they wrote me back and said, no, this was in 2024. They said, no, we have not written any new questions, but we will. Okay, they didn't say when, they just said they would. Well,
Okay.
they did. And they implemented those new questions, I believe, last summer. And so I've been trying really hard to talk to my students and find out what those new questions are. I only know one or two of them.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Moni, you seem to have learned a lot in this course. You're killing it on all the answers here.
I just finished implicit bias, to be honest. I
Oh,
just
really?
finished that chapter. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned it. I was like, what is this? This is new.
I like that stuff. To tell you the truth, I like fair housing and implicit bias are my favorite things. Speaking of which, it probably would be wise to do a little bit of fair housing questions that you will see. So let me see if I can pull up a couple of those. Uh, okay, I'm going to give you one that I got wrong. So obviously, I think this is a hard question because I got it wrong. Maybe you people are smarter than I am. We'll see. Okay. Which one of the following laws was the first attempt by the federal government to guarantee equal borrowing opportunities to all U.S. citizens? 1866 Civil Rights Act, 1922 Real Estate Law. That's ridiculous. B, Real Estate Law of 1922. That's license law. Okay. 1968 Fair Housing Act or 1975 Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. All right. The people who guessed C are absolutely right. Answer is C. And what's funny is I guessed A. Now, I'll tell you why I guessed A. Because if you ever read 1866 Civil Rights Act, which I've read, it says everybody in the whole country, regardless of race or previous condition of slavery, gets the same rights in real estate. And then they list what the rights are. And they list like every single thing you could do with real estate. You can inherit it. You can sue over it. You can rent it. You can farm it. You can sell it. You can give evidence in court, like on and on and on. They name like every single thing that anybody could possibly do to real estate. But they don't mention banks. Banks are not mentioned till 1968. Okay. So banks are not mentioned in fair housing law till 1968. So I was completely wrong, and a bunch of you got it right. Okay. Here's a question that is always, always, always on the test. Now, people who have not done uh, the fair housing chapter yet, these laws will probably be a little bit confusing because you're going like, I never saw most of these laws. What I will do when I send you the transcript later is I will give you a list of the fair housing laws you need to know. Okay, and then you'll have it in a nice little table and it'll be easy to see. Okay. So here's the next question. This question, I guarantee, is on both the school test and the state test. Family status and persons with disabilities became protected classes under which of the following laws? 1866 Civil Rights Act, 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1988 Amendment to Fair Housing Act, or this Housing and Community Development thing in 1974. I'm telling you, I can't fool you people. I don't know what to do. Answer is C. Okay. In 1988, they amended Fair Housing Act to protect disabled people and family status. Family status does not mean marriage, it means kids. Now, let me explain. So, after this 1988 amendment to the law, a landlord could not say to somebody, like, you can't live here because you're disabled, or you can't live here because you have too many kids, or you don't have enough kids, or you have kids at all, or whatever. Okay. So, the people who got it right, do you remember my silly way of remembering this? I'll put it in for you, okay? Because this is always. Oh, thank you. All right, she got it. Um, this here is the silly way to remember it. I guarantee this is always on the test. Okay, disabled people, wheelchairs, little kids, strollers. 1988. 1988 looks like wheels. So if you can remember the wheelchairs and the strollers for 1988, you've got this law. All right, always on the test.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure.
Um, would you say, now I know I might be stretching, would you say that many of the laws that you just put down are even going to be on the test? So we can like narrow it down just in case if people forgot. You know what I mean?
Well, I think I'm not understanding the question because see, these questions that I'm giving you, I don't make any of them up. They're questions that I
Yeah,
saw or that my
I'm
students saw.
I'm getting it, but like I'm saying like the Civil Rights Act of 1866, Civil Rights Act of 1964, do they usually give questions about civil rights acts or the housing and community development?
1866 Civil Rights Act is definitely on the test.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And I'll show you what the question is. It's really easy. It's what was the first fair housing law in the US? What was the answer? 1866 Civil Rights Act, right? And it's got to be because the date. It's the oldest one. So they will definitely ask you about that. Um,
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. I appreciate that.
oh, sure, sure. But hang on, since people have some curiosity about this, let me get for you, I'll get you that little table that I promised you right now. All right, and that'll clear up which laws you need to know. So here is the list of the laws that you have to know for fair housing. Okay, now it looks real teeny tiny, but I think you're able to enlarge it on your screen. If not, don't worry, it'll be in the transcript. Okay, here's another one. They love on the test, they love steering, blockbusting, and redlining. Which one of the following is the illegal practice of trying to induce panic selling in a neighborhood because of the entry of a certain racial, religious, or ethnic group? steering, antitrust. It's never antitrust. Okay. Antitrust has to do with business. It doesn't have to do with fair housing. Steering, antitrust, redlining, or blockbusting. What's the answer? Now, I had a guy in my class once. Okay, the answer is blockbusting, okay? Because what somebody's trying to do is they're trying to come into a neighborhood and get everybody to sell. And when they try to scare everybody into selling, then that destroys the neighborhood. It busts up the block. So I had a guy in my class once who said, I can never remember the difference between steering, blockbusting, and redlining. And I said to him, think about it like visually, okay? Because steering means showing real estate in a certain area based on a person's ethnic group. So, for example, you jump into a cab and you say to the driver, steer this Chinese guy to Chinatown, steer this Italian guy to Little Italy. And so it comes from the idea of steering a car and taking people to places where you think they belong because of their minority status. All right. Blockbusting is busting up the block, like we said a minute ago. Like you know how it is when you have a neighborhood and you go down the street and like you see all like the local people at the pharmacy and the supermarket checkout clerks and everybody. And like you go down the street and you say hi to everybody. And all of a sudden, if some broker comes in and scares everyone, it's time to sell. They busted up the block. They've destroyed your neighborhood. Okay, and then the last one is redlining. Redlining is for banks. And redlining is when the banks would take a red pen and put a map on the wall and draw red lines where they would not lend money. And it had nothing to do with the people's finances. It had to do with they would draw the red lines around minority neighborhoods. So that's not fair. I mean, people should be approved for a mortgage based on whether they can afford the mortgage, not what neighborhood they want to live in. So redlining is drawing the red lines, saying we won't lend in this neighborhood or that neighborhood. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you notes on steering, blockbusting, and redlining so that you can remember them. Because I guarantee there's like at least 3 or 4 questions on every test about steering, blockbusting, and redlining. Oh, another thing I want to tell you is that Department of State, now it's not true for the school test, but for the state test, Department of State, for some odd reason, they put all the math questions on the last page. So sometimes you get people that like I, for example, I like to spend a little extra time on the math questions and check my work and stuff. And so if you're going through the test and la-di-da, you think you have plenty of time, and then you get to the last page and boom, there's 4 math questions. You're like, oh no. So what I like to do if I'm taking a test from Department of State is I go to the last page first and get the math questions done while I still have plenty of time. The test is given on paper, so you can just go to the last page. And New York State does not give the test on computer because for the same reason that we vote on paper ballots, they think that paper tests are more secure than computerized, like they can't be hacked or anything. So Department of State still gives our test on paper. Now, I should tell you the funniest thing. I all this time I never looked at the time because I thought it was so good. that we were having such a good time that I never bothered to check the time. But it's almost 7:30. So I got to tell you, I think we're kind of on a roll and I think we should keep going. But if anybody has to leave, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know what time this class is supposed to end. I think it's supposed to end at 7 or something like that. So if you have to go, you don't have to worry because if you gave me your email address, I will email you the transcript of the whole entire webinar. But let's keep going while we're on a roll, okay? So I was kind of getting into these I was kind of getting into these fair housing questions because they are so important. Department of State just lovety lovety loves. Okay, here's an example. Mona was asking earlier if they tell little stories about people, and yes, they do. Like the last time I took the test, this question. Okay, thank you, Mona. This question was on the test, and it's about Santiago. So we have a character here, all right? So Santiago is a broker who shows homes to Latino buyers in mostly Latino areas. This is steering, blockbusting, redlining, or filtering. Filtering I don't think is in the curriculum, but I'll tell you what it is. The idea is that, like, take Harlem, for example, okay? Harlem started out as being a very expensive community. And they were originally, when the homes were built, like in the 1890s, they were very well made, very expensive, and kind of like rich people lived there. And there was an exclusive country club in Harlem and everything. And then over the years, the quality of the homes kind of went down as they got older. And so the prices went down and it kind of filtered, the real estate kind of filtered down to middle class people. And then it got worse and worse, and the properties got older and more run down, and they kind of filtered down to the poorer people. So that's what they mean by the concept of filtering. All right. So yeah, he's got into the cab and he told the driver to steer this Latino guy to Spanish Harlem. Okay. So that would be steering. So the answer is A. Now, while we are on this subject, I have another one that I think is a little bit hard. And this one is a fair housing question from the state test. If homeowners in a certain area have had repeated and intense solicitation by real estate licensees, Department of State can establish a protection order, cease and desist zone, injunctive correction, or writ of habeas corpus. Um, I'm just joking. I'm laughing because habeas corpus has to do with like illegal detention or illegal imprisonment. Answer is B, cease and desist zone. Answer is B. Now, let me talk about that because it's interesting. Um, if you go to the Bronx, which I often do, every time I go to the Bronx, I see all these brand new apartment buildings and like there's so much construction going on in the Bronx these days. It's changing a lot every time I go there. And that means that the Bronx is really, really hot in terms of real estate. So all kinds of builders and brokers, they keep knocking on people's doors and going, why don't you sell your house? Why don't you sell your house? Why don't you sell your house? And like, we'll buy your house and we'll tear it down and build an apartment building. So these poor people are getting so sick of being hounded about selling their house that they call Department of State and they say, look, we're being harassed by these brokers. Now, they may be harassed because of blockbusting, but it doesn't have to be blockbusting. It doesn't have to be motivated by any kind of prejudice. They could just be harassed for financial reasons. But whatever, if Department of State determines that people are being harassed by real estate brokers, they can create a cease and desist zone, which is an area on the map where we are not allowed to go and try to drum up business. Now, if you want to know where these places are, all you do is go to Department of State websites and they have the maps there for the cease and desist zones. And of course, large parts of the Bronx now are a cease and desist zone because the poor people, the homeowners there are just getting so fed up with being asked to sell.
Dos días adicionales en los parques temáticos al comprar un paquete de habitación y tickets de 4 noches, 4 días en hoteles Resort Disney selectos.
Un nuevo amigo peludo en la familia. Agrega oxígeno y líquido a tu detergente.
Don't worry, I'm fixing that.
Todas las manchas.
There we go. Took me a moment. Okay. Now, let's see what else we have. How do they choose the parts? Well, they do an investigation. And like they find out if people really are being harassed, like whether they've been receiving email blasts or robocalls or anything like that, or even just people knocking on their doors. All right. Now, on this theme of little stories, indeed, on the state test, we have an example of a question that is like a little story. Terry Lee. Oh, there it goes again with no ABC. I'm sorry about that. Terry leases retail space in a building and later finds out that her lease does not allow her to use the space to host cocktail parties after hours. This prohibition would have been stated in which one of the following lease clauses? Thank you, the use clause. Now, a lot of people don't realize that use clause can be not just for the landlord, but also for the tenant. Because sometimes a tenant will say, I'm going to give you a question that you are likely to see on both the school test or the state test. Which clause in a lease might include a non-compete provision saying that no other tenants in the building will sell the same goods as any one tenant? I'm not even going to give you choices because I think you can guess. What's the answer? Exactly right, the use clause. Because tenants can place a use clause too, not just landlords. And that's why, if you go to Empire State Building, on the ground floor of Empire State Building, they have a drugstore. I think it's a Walgreens. Okay. But if you go into Empire State Building, you will not see a Walgreens and a CVS and a Rite Aid. And the reason is that Walgreens has a non-compete section of their use clause that says there will be no other stores in the building selling health and beauty items. All right, I have a question for you from the school test. And this is from chapter 16. So the people who have only done like 3 chapters, you're off the hook. An amenity purchaser. Oh, it gave it away. How did that get bold? It gave it away. I'm so sorry. I better fix that. How did that get bold? Didn't look bold when I looked at it. Okay. So obviously the answer is A. There are 2 kinds of buyers. An investor who wants to rent out the building and make money, or an amenity buyer who wants to use the building for their own business. Like, for example, Bank of America Tower. Okay, Bank of America's in it, right? So they would be an amenity buyer because they built the building so they could use it. You know, I have not been able once to stump anybody. I've got to find a question. I've got to find a question I can stump you on. So far, everybody has gotten every single question right. Which is not regulated by zoning ordinances? A building's size, height, materials, or use. Beautiful. Answered that in a nanosecond. Zoning cares about use and size and appearance. They don't care about structural integrity or safety because that is Department of Buildings. They love to ask you questions on the test about the difference between Department of Zoning and Department of Buildings. I've got a math question for you. And this math question does not have any numbers in it. Sometimes they do that on both the school test and the state test. They will ask you for an equation without giving you any numbers to solve. So here's an example. What term is used to describe the difference between the rentable and usable area in commercial space? Loss factor, operating stop, square footage, or natural break-even point? Loss factor is correct. Yes. I'm telling you, Mildred, you should be teaching this class. You're getting them all right. I have another one for you. Another fair housing question that I want to make sure everybody gets. Yeah, she's ready for the test. Least favorite. Oh, you didn't like construction? Oh my goodness. I can't believe it's going to be tomorrow. Well, you're going to do very well. That's obvious. You know what's going to happen? You're going to go tomorrow and you're going to see some of these questions and you're going to think of our class tonight. Who would be most likely to get an exception to fair housing law? A landlord with 100 units, a broker, New York City Housing Authority, or roommates? Thank you. Answer is D, roommates. Fair Housing Act does not apply to people who are sharing their own personal home. Now, I don't mean a person who has a house with a rental apartment in it. I mean a person who's looking for a roommate, like they want somebody to share their living room and kitchen and bathroom and dining room and all that stuff. So if they're looking for someone to share their personal home. Now, let me give you an example. We know that disabled people are protected under the law. But what if I want to share my home and somebody shows up with an ADA service dog and I say, look, I would love to live with you, but I'm allergic to dogs and I have a disability, which is my allergy. So I can't have you live with me. That's allowed under fair housing law. Or another example would be, what if I said, well, I want a roommate, I want a female roommate, I don't want a male roommate. Can I do that? Yes, I can. So Fair Housing Act does not apply to people who are sharing their own personal home. I'm thinking of Mildred for tomorrow, and I have another one that you're going to see, and I hope that when you see it, you get a laugh. I'll show you what it is. This question is always on the state test. Mrs. Davis purchased a house. The deed granted her the right to walk across the adjacent driveway to get to the beach. What is Mrs. Davis's legal right called? Easement and gross. This is I think it's chapter 3, actually. Easement and gross, exclusion, encroachment, or easement appurtenant. Yeah, A or D, because you know it's an easement, right? Easement appurtenant is correct. Easement and gross is the government or the utility. Okay, so easement. Now, for those people who have not taken that chapter yet, an easement means someone legally can use your real estate. And in this case, Mrs. Davis is using the next door neighbor's real estate to get to the beach. She's walking over it. So easement appurtenant is for private buildings. Engross means the government or the utility can use the real estate. So tomorrow, when you see Mrs. Davis, yeah, I hope you'll get a kick out of it. Now, I want to ask you something, Mildred. If you see a question about implicit bias or cultural competence, I would appreciate if you would give it to me. I told you that I do have at least one of the questions, one of the new questions that is on the test. So let me see if I can give it to you, okay? Here we go. Giving it to everyone, but I'm hoping that Mildred tomorrow will remember the implicit bias and cultural competence questions. When Social Security and labor laws were instituted in the 1930s, they did not apply to what type of workers? Workers in certain states, teachers, domestic and agricultural workers, or they applied to all workers? And if people don't know the answer to this, I understand because it's not in our curriculum. Department of State did not have this topic in their course outline. So none of the schools knew that they were going to ask this. The only way we found out they were going to ask this is they stuck it on the test. Thank you. Thank you. The answer is indeed C. Answer is C. Now, I'll give you an example. My cousin is a farmer. She grew up on a dairy farm in upstate New York. Okay. So she was working outside on the dairy farm from the day she could walk. I mean, she was out there 12 years old, and maybe it was doing stupid stuff, like maybe it was just bringing drinks to the workers on a hot day, but nevertheless, she was out there working her whole entire life on the farm because family farms, they need every single person to pitch in. So, like child labor laws, for example, do not apply to agricultural workers. All right. Oh my goodness, I just checked the time again. So it's almost 8 o'clock. So let me see if I can give you one for the road. Here's another one where we have a little story. And I'm hoping that everyone can get this right. What chapter is implicit bias? It's I think it's part of fair housing chapter, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think it's going to help you too much because when we wrote the implicit bias chapter, they didn't give us schools, they didn't give us very much guidance on what they were going to put on the test. But I will give you a tip, okay? I'm going to give us one more question, and then I'll give you a tip about implicit bias. Now, this is from, I think, chapter 3, Estates and Interests. So probably the people who are new should know this. Oh, very good. You've got the chapter and the lecture. I wrote the class and I can't even remember. Sam wills his house to his wife, Pam, excuse me, for her lifetime. You can imagine I've had to stop recording. I can't record classes because I don't have a voice. Sam wills his house to his wife, Pam, for her lifetime, and then to his son, Dan, after Pam's death. Dan's interest is known as pro travi, remainder, homestead, or intestate. So what is Dan known as? Okay, hang on. Now I want to clarify something. If we read this question again, Sam wills his house to Pam for her lifetime, not for anybody else's lifetime, for her lifetime. And when Pam dies, then Dan gets the house in fee simple. So absolutely right. Yes. Answer is B. The person who inherits the house after the life estate owner dies is called the remainder man. Gotta love it, right? It's like so King Arthur. Okay, now I promised Mildred I was going to give some information about implicit bias. I believe they are going to ask you on the test. I think Doss will ask on the test, what is the, excuse me, definition of implicit bias? And the answer is this. Implicit bias is also called unconscious bias. Implicit bias means experience plus association. Now I'm going to give you an example. My sister's dog is terrified of French fries. The reason he's terrified of French fries is that somebody accidentally gave him a French fry that was too hot and it hurt his mouth. So every time he sees a French fry, he barks at it and runs away. Okay. So he has a bias against French fries. Now, why does he have the bias? He had the experience of getting a French fry that burned his mouth, and he has the association French fries always burn. So implicit bias is a combination of experiences and associations. So I have a feeling that that's what they probably will ask you on the test. Okay, you can tell I'm losing my voice, so I keep saying one more, and I never do, but I really better end the class because I'm really losing my voice now. So does anybody have anything to say before, thank you. Does anybody have anything to say before we finish up? Sounds like everybody's good. All right, everybody's probably just tired because we worked for like 2 hours. But give me a little bit of time because what I do is I edit the transcript to take out the spoilers so that when you see the questions, it doesn't have all the answers sitting right there, you know. I do the questions and I give a space and put the answer underneath so that way you don't have a spoiler every time you see a question. All right, so I will I'll send the transcript to you tonight. Oh, you have to say good night to that's my Boney Maroney. That's my little dog who I sometimes have her in the course. That's my little Boney Maroney. So she's the one who's resting. Okay, thanks everybody. So I'm going to say good night. Good, good, good. Okay. All right. Good night.